Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Scott, and thanks to all of you for coming. Very excited to be here. As Scott mentioned, I'm the CSO with RTKL. We are a global architecture planning and design firm with a simple mission to build a better world. So a couple of years ago, I was in an airport newsstand where I spend a fair amount of time, like I'm sure most conference goers do. And I saw the cover of Scientific American beckon to me from across the room, a plan for a sustainable future. And I thought, yes, finally, all the answers in one thin volume I can shove in my briefcase. Then I got closer and the subtitle revealed itself, How to Get All Energy from Wind, Water, and Solar by 2030, and I thought, oh, so a sustainable future means just clean energy. By the way, this is not synced with that, just so I apologize if I'm glancing over here because this isn't working here. So essentially what that means is that the land of milk and honey will be essentially photovoltaics and wind turbines. So to test that, imagine a day when everything we make is clean, harmless, and infinitely renewable. Is that enough? So to make it more personal, if I told you every morning you can ingest a little pill like this one and meet all of your daily nutritional needs, would that be enough? Would you miss the tangy spray of orange on your tongue as you bite into it? David Orr, who's something of an intellectual mentor of mine, as he is for most of us, I believe, distinguishes between two types of sustainability, technological and ecological. To illustrate the difference, he gives a medical analogy. If a guy has a heart attack, the first order of business is to stop the heart attack and return his vital signs to normal. The longer order of business, the tougher challenge, is to deal with the lifestyle issues that led to the heart attack in the first place. And really, it's the difference between efficiency of stuff and quality of life. So the Earth is having a heart attack and we're fumbling around for newfangled defibrillators to stop the heart attack. But then there's the question that remains after we've managed to do that, how do we address the cultural and quality of life issues that led to the heart attack in the first place? Futurist John Naisbitt, who has maybe the best title there is, I wish it said futurist on my business card, he gives a similar distinction between what he calls high-tech solutions and high-touch solutions. So to give you an example from seating, designers, are there any furniture designers in the room? Anybody? Industrial designers? So there's the act of sitting. So now a very smart high-tech strategy would be something like Joris Larsman's bone chair, which acts a little like Michelangelo. It sort of takes away all the material that's unnecessary for the act of holding up the body and leaves only the resources remaining. Now, an alternative to that, a good high-touch solution would be to eliminate the very need for a chair, as is the case with the many cultural traditions around the world, where kneeling or sitting on the floor is popular. So which is smarter, the smartest possible chair we could make, or eliminating the need for a chair? So another way of putting that is, what are we sustaining? Is it life support systems or life itself? If it's life itself, then certainly beauty, joy, and experience come into play. Now, these are not things that we normally associate with a conventional approach to sustainable design. So another way of asking that is, sustainable design claims to be design that behaves more like nature, so then that begs the question, what's nature like? I took this photo in the Sierras in the autumn a few years ago, and I happened to drive into a grove of aspen trees in the middle of a very brief period when it looks like this. It's like walking into a three-dimensional sunset. So when you come upon a scene like this, the first question you ask is not, you don't observe, look at all the chlorophyll ebbing from the leaves, and therefore the tree is losing its ability to sequester carbon and produce oxygen. That's not your first reaction. Your first reaction is it takes your breath away. So if design is to behave more like nature, then the first order of business is to knock your socks off. Now, unfortunately, sustainable design has a reputation for keeping your socks decidedly intact. So this is a building, the first LEED Platinum building in the Middle East, which won an award as the most intelligent building in the world. And it is extremely intelligent from a conventional approach to sustainable design, which is its systems, its technology. Yet from an architectural standpoint, from a beauty standpoint, I think it's fair to say that it misses the mark. We have to do better than this. So, and it's buildings like that that lead architects to think that sustainability is not relevant to the things they care about. This is Raphael Vignoli, who's a former employer of mine, has said that sustainability has or should have no relationship to style. Not only is there not evidence that sustainable design does relate to aesthetics, it shouldn't at all. Peter Eisenman, green and sustainability have nothing to do with architecture. Finally, a few years ago, the American Prospect magazine was led to ask, is well-designed green architecture an oxymoron? So not only does sustainable design have a reputation for being unattractive, apparently it's inevitably unattractive. I think there's an instinct, if you ask designers or the general public alike, do you think good design and green design should be the same thing? I think most would say yes. But when it comes down to it, when push comes to shove, they are not the same. We don't see them as the same. So here's a survey from another magazine that asked, when, meaning how many years in the future will it take before good design and green design are considered to be the same thing? Now, 2/3 of respondents said they thought it would happen within 4 to 5 years. An overwhelming majority, 80-something%, said they thought it would happen within 8 to 9 years. That was 2002, Metropolis magazine, so it's 10 years later, and as my survey from 2 years ago shows, that they're still not the same. So E.O. Wilson, who's a biologist who is mostly known for his work on ants, he's considered one of the foremost experts on ants, also in his spare time seems to toss out these little books that completely revolutionize our thinking about the relationship between culture and nature. Consilience, which for me should be at the top of your reading list, except for maybe after my book. He mentions C.P. Snow, who in the 70s said that there are two cultures today in the modern era. They are the culture of the arts and the culture of the sciences. And as an example, he points to our education system. We spend an hour from the day we enter school, when we're 5 or 6, we spend an hour looking at math, an hour looking at science, an hour looking at history, et cetera. We never look at the connections between them. And there's a pretty strong argument that that myopic, siloed way of thinking and looking at the world is what led to the environmental crisis in the first place. E.O. Wilson says that until we bridge that fundamental divide between the arts and the sciences, we can never hope to address the challenges that the sustainability movement is trying to address. For designers, another way of putting that is that great design is the marriage of art and science, and green design has to be the same. Now at RTKL, we're developing a strategy we call performance-driven design that we think will finally bridge this gap. So the book is divided into 3 categories around what I call 3 kinds of shape. So the book is called The Shape of Green, which is essentially the argument is that sustainability not only can, it should be visible in the very form and image of design. And I look at 3 kinds of shape for doing that. Conservation is shaping to conserve resources, attraction is shaping to appeal to people, and connection is shaping for a particular place. And I'll go through each of these. So with each of these categories, I give a little quote from someone who's smarter about beauty than I am. Emerson, in his famous essay on beauty, says that the line of beauty is the result of perfect economy. He looks at things like honeycombs, feather quills, and says that there are abundant examples in nature of how nature conserves resources in ways that we find elegant. So in other words, you can see the conservation of resources in the very structure of something, as you do in this honeycomb. Now, a conventional approach to sustainable design, that's not the case. So if I ask someone to mention a green car, typically they mention one of the hybrids because they're the cars that we associate most with sustainability. Most recent American hybrids are virtually indistinguishable from their conventional counterparts. So these are 2 images of the 2010 Honda Civic, the hybrid and the conventional, and the chassis is virtually indistinguishable. Performance is something that's hidden under the hood in the engine. and it doesn't make itself visible in the body design. By contrast, I drive a first-generation smart car, which gets better mileage than most of the American hybrids just because it's small and round and light. And for me, this is a good example of what I call design trumping technology. If we don't start with the napkin sketch and try to introduce sustainable principles, then by and large, what we end up doing, especially in something as complex as a building, is trying to compensate for bad decisions we made at the concept stage by introducing smarter technology. The second principle the book is organized around is attraction, or shape for pleasure. So again, in keeping with what I said before, people smarter than I am about beauty, Keats's famous statement that a thing of beauty is a joy forever, the suggestion that there's this relationship between beauty and well-being or joy. So there's a Senegalese poet who says that in the end we conserve only what we love. What that means is if something doesn't appeal to us, then we're not likely to embrace it, and therefore we might be more likely to discard it. Think about cornstarch utensils. Congress last year discontinued them. Why is that? If they were incredibly beautiful and something that everyone rallied behind because they enjoyed them, would we be so quick to discontinue them? So if we conserve only what we love, then it begs the question, what do we love? I like babies. Someone recently gave me the advice that all great talks should feature either a baby or a puppy in order to manipulate your audience's emotions. So I'm shamelessly admitting my tactics here. The next slide is actually a puppy, so I'm doubly manipulating you. So Conrad Lawrence, the psychologist, did studies of the proportions of various things in nature and created the argument that we tend to be drawn towards things that remind us of babies and puppies because it brings out the caretaker in all of us. So things with rounded proportions, big eyes. Think about the whole Japanese anime industry. So now, does that mean that everything should look like babies and puppies? No. My point is just that there is a growing body of research, scientific research, that shows empirically that certain kinds of shapes, patterns, and colors lead to certain responses that are beneficial. So the backbone of the sustainable design movement, especially in the building industry, is looking at research that shows that by adopting certain strategies, there are certain benefits to productivity, absenteeism, patient stay time in hospitals, et cetera. And often they have to do with using actual nature, bringing more of actual nature into building setting, daylighting, fresh air, views of green growing things, et cetera. At the same time, there's a growing body of research, some of it's the same reports, that shows that you don't actually have to reproduce nature, plant a tree, build a green wall or a green roof, in order to reap those benefits. You can just emulate the underlying geometrical and mathematical principles of these things. The final principle that I organized the book around is connection, shape for place. Again, quoting for someone smarter than I am, this is the same essay from Emerson, "Nothing is quite beautiful alone." He goes on at length about how things in nature that we perceive to be beautiful are always beautiful because we see them in relation to everything around them. So now, if design is intended to interact with nature, one definition of sustainability would be the graceful interaction of culture and nature. So if you look at nature and what it's offering us, you see this. You see a wide range of images of beauty. Now, we tend to talk about the environment in the singular as if it's one homogeneous space, that as if it's one, like think about the Sahara sort of writ large on the entire face of the planet, but instead it's an endlessly diverse series of fields and streams and beautiful settings. So it's really, when we talk about the environment, we really should talk about the myriad environments. And yet when we design for the environment, we tend not to do that. I think it's fair to say. So most of the buildings that get built in America, maybe on the planet, look something like this, and you have no idea where you are. So if sustainability is about the interaction of culture and nature, or you could say that design is about the interaction of culture and nature. Nature is offering us this incredibly rich bounty, and what we're giving back is pretty sorry. It's not architects' fault. We are trained to believe that greatness equals a certain response. I believe that until the Renaissance, roughly, the tradition of great architecture was sacred space, churches, temples, mausoleums, etc. And there's a Western tradition that says that that kind of response to a place is to set it apart from a place because it was considered to be something that was removed from everyday life. You look at the Parthenon, there's an incredible book called Socrates' Ancestor that's about how the design of the Doric temple essentially was to make it look like it had wings or a ship with oars, as if it's going to leave this place, take off and fly. You think about some of the famous photographs of it or drawings of it, it looks like that. It looks as if it's hovering above this place. There's a very different tradition, which again is the sort of secret history of architecture and vernacular and indigenous building patterns, where you can see, just squint your eyes, you can see there's a very different relationship between buildings and land or culture and nature. So people who learn to live in a particular place over a very long period of time learn very different responses to those places. And by and large, all over the world, building and land merge. Now, these are some pretty extreme examples because they're using whatever materials they have close at hand, and not all indigenous or vernacular building patterns look like this. My point is just that if we're going to think of new ways to interact with nature in design, then we'll need alternatives that transcend what we've been taught is great design. Great design in the past led to the problems we're trying to produce, or we're trying to attack now, and as a result, we really need a very different response.